With the air now, the science has been solved. The electronic underpinning of our biology is even more broad than we ever thought. We're already plugged into the machine, and there are already large tech companies behind that are nudging our behavior. The question is, how many people will be using these devices?
Would you be happy to put an implant inside your skull? What if it could help treat cancer? Scientist and engineer Ben Woodington's work is making this a reality. His tiny brain-computer interface, Soma-1, senses and stimulates electrical activity in the body to help it fight disease.
When you plant chips in the brain, will it change our mood?
It's a huge ethical question, and one that you and I are going to have to wrestle with in our lifetimes. This is very, very high performance engineering, comparable to space flight.
What's driving you to do this?
I was at a bit of a crossroads in my career. Really, the question for me was, what are the most interesting and impactful trends that I see over the next 10 or 20 years? And this is really cutting edge science, and I thought this feels like a place that I need to work. Complete merging of machine data, human being, I think is going to solve a lot of our problems and diseases. That's super exciting to me. We've never had anything like that. When will these technologies be available to very healthy people? The answer to that is
Welcome to the new episode of the HumanWare project. Today we have a special guest, Ben Woodington. He's working in the future of the brain-computer interface and where are we now with this technology. Welcome to the HumanWare project.
It's great to be here.
What's your mission and what's driving you to do this?
So our mission is to extend human lifespan using bidirectional neural interfaces. We want to control biological function, disease state using electrical stimulation. And we want to collect, distill data, insights, understanding about human health in a way that's never been achieved before, that is only possible with these tiny implantable devices. And we think the quickest and the highest impact place we can work is in cancer. That is the place where we can have massive impact to human life and reduce human suffering very, very quickly. But we don't want to stop there. We want to expand these technologies into so many diseases and really, end human suffering in a really very real way.
What is the brain-computer interface?
Broadly, brain-computer interfaces are any technology that can enable communication between the brain and some computer or microchip. Now, that can be as simple as a few electrodes sat on the surface of the brain. That could be you or I sat in an MRI scanner interfacing with that machine, or it could be an array of electrodes that are inserted deep into the brain or on the surface of the brain that can collect that electrical information, communicate that to a computer.
So it doesn't have to be implanted in the brain?
For sure not. I think this is a very catch-all term, and there are many, many technologies that enable us to collect the biological activity of the brain and process it in a computer. This can be further subdivided into motor interfaces, devices that can record motor intent and then control, for example, an electronic wheelchair or a cursor on a computer screen. Or that could be devices that allow you to collect information about a disease state in the brain and allow you to elicit some communication by electrical stimulation to control some function in the brain as well.
That's very interesting to know because I always thought brain-computer interface, it means you have to implant.
Certainly not. I mean, this can be, there's a wide range of this technology. It's a big catch-all term.
What got you interested in this area at the first place?
I actually started studying chemistry. So I was working in drug development. I then moved into drug delivery and medical devices. So I was working then, how can we optimize how we get more drugs to the places in the body that we need them? So I was there for a number of years. I was working in this industry. It was a super interesting industry. I was at a bit of a crossroads in my career. Really, the question for me was, if I wanted to work in healthcare, is like, what are the most interesting and impactful trends that I see over the next 10 or 20 years? And I felt like I had two choices. It was either apply, what we were calling the machine learning, AI to healthcare, or this sort of bubbling field of neurotechnology. And this was just before Neuralink had announced their company. This was around the time that a company called Synchron had just done their sort of first in human implantations. And I thought, this field seems incredible. And this feels like a place that I need to work. I did a master's and I did a PhD at the University of Cambridge, looking at how we can implant electrodes into the body, wrap them around the spinal cord, and collect electronic information from there to look at pain and spinal cord injury as well. And the idea then is eventually you create something that's therapeutic for patients with a spinal cord injury, where you would look to electrically stimulate as well to try to encourage rehabilitation.
Where does the pain come from? Is that come from our brain or is it come from our body?
Pain as a field is incredibly complex, but the pain is being processed in the brain. When people say it's all in your head, like it really is all in your head, that's where it's being processed.
Could you take us into the details of what your company do?
We design neurotechnologies. So again, these are technologies that can be implanted and communicate with the body in some way. And there are really two pillars of focus of our company. One is we want to design very, very tiny implantable neurotechnologies to treat, track, and understand diseases. We're developing these for therapeutic purposes. So rather than decoding motor intent, we're actually looking at disease state, tracking disease state, and treating diseases. Now, the second pillar of our company is really focused on the application of these technologies in oncology, in cancer treatment. Our brain-based platform is focused on brain cancers, such as glioblastoma or metastatic brain cancer, but we're interested in the application of those technologies in other peripheral cancers as well. Now, there's been some incredible research by our collaborators at Cambridge and Stanford and UCSF that show that there's a direct correlation between cancer cells and the neurons. What this means is there is a specific electrical signature that we can track over time. And this is really, really cutting-edge science. We'll be publishing papers on it later this year, where we have actually shown that we can record the electrical information and actually classify cancer progression, cancer presence, just from its electrical activity. For us, this means that we've designed an entirely new field of neural biomarkers of cancer, something that you can't capture just from a biopsy, but something that you can capture directly from an electrode being placed inside the body. The electronic underpinning of our biology is even more broad than we ever thought. We're finding that this electrical activity is underpinning almost every biological process in our body in both healthy and disease state. And so it wasn't very shocking for us that this electrical underpinning is present in cancer as well, knowing that it's present in every other disease. But once we have that as our framework, that almost every process in the body is controlled electronically, then we can start designing devices and, of course, the compute on the back end to understand and to treat these diseases as well.
Could you show us the Soma-1?
So our first product, as you say, is Soma-1. Soma-1 is a very, very tiny, minimally invasive device that will be actually implanted flush with the skull. That device is implanted during existing surgery. So in existing cancer surgeries, we will implant this device, and then it interfaces with the brain underneath the skull. Yeah. That's Soma-1. It's our first product. We're bringing it to our first human studies later this year.
Could you tell us a little bit of how our brain functions?
Your brain is fundamentally controlling almost every biological process in your body, right? So from a longevity standpoint, we're obsessed with the brain. The brain is going to be the last thing that we need to protect. Cancers, we're targeting. Neurodegeneration, other people are targeting with these kind of technologies. These are the diseases that we're going to have to fix, because really there's very, very little in sort of ultimate lifestyle hacks that we can do to end these. So we have to be focused on the brain.
So what's the difference electronic profile between cancer patient and the normal people?
Really, it all comes down to the frequency of the electrical activity. So you can record cancer cells directly. You can actually put an electrode on a cancer cell, and it has a specific electronic signature. When the cancer is in the presence of lots of neurons in the body, nerves in the body, the nerves act in a very different way as well. So the nerves have a frequency component as well that we can measure. So what we see is we get this hyper excitement around the cancer, and we can actually, using AI, machine learning, we can then classify these into neural biomarkers of disease state.
What will be the treatment like if we think ahead of the time?
Now, we can use these neural biomarkers to enable precision medicine, maybe to switch people into new drugs, to go back into treatment. But the more exciting thing for us is we can actually use electrical stimulation to treat these diseases. And there's a whole host of possibilities there, from disrupting the electrical activity of the cancer cells directly or the supporting neurons to actually modulating immune function. And all of this can be done using electrical stimulation, electrical control.
The chips you guys are inventing, is the size matters?
Absolutely. When it comes to neural interfaces, size definitely matters. The smaller you can develop these devices and manufacture these devices, the safer they can be. So for neurosurgeons and for patients, they want things to be very, very simple, very, very safe. And there's a direct correlation between how small you can make it and how safe the surgery ends up being. So For our lead product, which is called Soma-1, what we're looking at is implanted the device through what's called like a perforation. So this is a very, very common procedure that doctors use where they cut a very, very small hole actually through the skull and we can implant the devices. And the recovery from that surgery is very, very quick. We don't have to perform what's called a craniotomy where you cut a large part of the skull away. The patient has to recover for weeks and weeks afterwards. It's very, very simple surgery.
What will be the benefit or irreplaceable benefit to implant it compared with traditional method we already have?
But the critical thing really for us is the signal quality and the signal control. From the outside, you're going to get a very low resolution, very noisy signal that you can do some things with, but you can't do very much with. And once you put these electrodes inside the body, you can get a lot more rich information. And the same goes for the electrical stimulation and control as well. From the outside, maybe you can target some broad area of the brain or body, but really you're really lacking that specificity of disease control. Once you're inside, you have very, very high specificity. And the reason for that really is just nature gave us this very thick protective helmet, our skull, which just turns out to be very attenuating for those signals. There's also a patient benefit for going inside. It's often spoken about non-invasive versus invasive, scary invasive versus not scary sat on the surface of the skull. But in terms of the patient experience, these implants are very much implant during surgery and then forget about them then for the rest of the patient's life. So they're actually very non-intrusive. Rather than wearing big wires coming off the head, being seen in the street and people recognize that you're wearing something, often you have to shave your head, smother gels on your head. Patients really don't like this.
The problem with the traditional way, I have to say, is they really hard to get connectivity and you need to measure your brain to get the right spot and you can't move a lot because if you move, it's creating noise. When we talk about the implant, you have talked about we can do neuromodulation and neurostimulation. Will it be possible when you implant the chips, they also give you stimulation from that chips?
Absolutely. So we're looking at this bidirectional communication. We're looking at both recording and also, stimulation and neuromodulation or other electrical stimulation routines. And we do this from our device as well.
So when you plant the chips in the brain, will it be possible we change our mood using those devices?
It is true that mood and psychological nudging is becoming a reality now. There are technologies out there that are being used in, for example, depression. And this is incredibly exciting. This is obviously a disorder that affects millions and millions of people in the world. I think it's ultimately going to be possible. Ethically, will it happen? Culturally, will it happen? These are two different questions. I do have some questions around the trade-offs. Typically in biology, there's no free lunch. If you modify one behavior, typically something else gets downregulated. When people are very, very sick and they have no other option, they're happy to take that for healthy people that are otherwise living a very, great and fulfilled life. Maybe not. It's a large ethical question for sure.
What are the histories of the brain-computer interface?
A lot of what we are now calling implantable brain-computer interfaces are also older than people think. In the 60s and 70s, the first work was done with what's called deep brain stimulation. Electrodes going down into the brain. It's taken a long, long time for these technologies to be commercialized, to be clinically translated, and to be culturally adopted, frankly, into people. Of course, now we're seeing these very exciting BCI technologies presenting as if it's brand new technology. But it's certainly not. This is a convergence of sort of medical device world, neuromodulation of the brain, and the new BCI world, recording from the brain. We're seeing a convergence of these two fields that's almost 100 years old now.
Could you tell us which stage are we in general, in tech, and where are we heading to?
With the air now, the science has been solved. It's now an engineering and a clinical challenge. They've actually designed these first wireless devices that really can fit into a person's life without massive pieces of supporting computer, machinery, everything else. Just a very, very small chip that goes into the head and the patient can interact with that device. There are now numerous companies that are doing very similar things with devices, implanting these devices into the body seamlessly. The question is now, what will the clinical and commercial uptake be? How many people will be using these devices? And we're going to find that out over the next 5 years, probably, as these devices will become approved by the FDA and are rolled out. Now, okay, the technology's here. How many people are going to be using them? Now, of course, on the tails of that, we have a whole new generation of technologies. Devices that are smaller, that are softer, that are less risky, that are more powerful. And these are all coming as well. applying these technologies to different diseases and different conditions as well. I mean, this wave is coming, and we're going to see this play out over the next probably 5 to 10 years.
If the first stage of the brain-computer interface is cure disease, where do you think the next stage is going to go?
It's a huge ethical question, and one that you and I are going to have to wrestle with in our lifetimes. We're already connected to machines. We have this optical connection to our smartphone, and there are already large tech companies behind that are nudging our behavior in certain ways. So, we're already plugged into the machine. Now, what does it mean to be now next physically plugged into the machine as well? We can't separate from that, right? It's hard to switch these things off. Of course, you can stop charging the device, but ultimately, you and that device become one and the same thing. Now, what does that mean for a future where AI, AGI, ASI becomes incredibly prevalent, incredibly powerful, as I think most of us now agree it is going to be? Actually, I think these technologies become even more essential. I think they become even more essential for alignment purposes. I think they become even more essential for us to keep up with these technologies as well. But I'll take a more positive and less cynical view as well. My more positive view is I think the rise of these sort of therapeutic BCI technologies are going to be incredibly complementary. We're going to have real-world data from the brain and from the body than we've ever had in history. There's never been this kind of minute-by-minute, second-by-second recording of your biological activity. And we're going to have superintelligence to analyze that data, process that data in real time. That's super exciting to me. We've never had anything like that. In the history of humankind, we've never had anything like that. That complete merging of machine data, human being, I think is going to solve a lot of our problems and diseases.
Is this going to be technology in the future available to everybody?
I don't think price is going to be the issue. I think these technologies will become much, much cheaper, and I think they will be economically available to many, many people, as smartphones are today. There are still questions over the cultural tolerability of these technologies and the clinical acceptance of these technologies as well. So will we get to a point in culture where that's accepted? I don't know, is the honest answer. I think we will certainly get to a place where it's as commonplace as, for example, like a contraceptive implant, where the risks are incredibly low and minor, like absolutely we'll do that for this particular condition. Will people be able to get them just for fun? I don't know.
What about for the people nowadays? What will be the process like for someone to participate in this?
So right now, these technologies are reserved for the very sick. For people to access many of these technologies over the next, let's say 5 years, many of them are going to be reserved for people who are willing to take part in clinical trials. Slowly, these technologies will move into clinical use, and then patients who are still sick but don't want to take part in a clinical trial will just be able to opt for these technologies as well.
Yeah.
And we're close to that. We're very, very close to that. When will these technologies be just available to very healthy people? It's a big question mark.
And how fast is this industry being developing? What if the hardware are making progress and I have the old, let's say, model in my brain?
If I tried to sell you a phone and said, when I sell you this phone, you won't be able to upgrade that phone for the next 10, 15 years, you'd probably say no. This is a question that people have to answer with these technologies. How will we make sure that people can be upgraded? How can they stay up to date with the one that can control their disease? There are ways to update firmware, to update the software on the device, and you can add performance to that. So you want to add quite a lot of redundancy into the hardware so that you can update the software as much as you want to add new features. A second way may be that you can actually do hardware upgrades as well. So you can create modular devices that you can go in through a very, very simple small surgery and update the device that way. Already with these technologies, batteries are replaced, for example. So when the battery dies after so many years, people go in and replace the battery. So you could imagine a world in which a small incision is made in the skin, the way, again, you would maybe remove like a contraceptive implant or a glucose monitor, for example, and then upgrade to your device.
And how does those chips get powered?
In our case, for our first product, we're actually batteryless. So we have no battery inside the device, and we power the device continuously through a very, very small wearable. And we use this to maintain constant communication with our implant. Now, that means that we can make the device much, much smaller, but it also means that we remove a lot of the kind of metal and the battery inside the device, which can lead to MRI artifacts as well.
So this wearable devices is sending the signal and charging the devices outside of your brain.
Yes, yeah. And we use that sort of inductive charging couple between the outside of the body and the implant in the device. Yeah.
If I have this implant in me and then I'm getting closer to, let's say, Wi-Fi free zone, will that affect the signal I receiving from my devices and mess up with my brain?
The answer to that is absolutely not. There are protected frequency bands that we can work within to charge these devices. They don't mess up other devices, and those other devices don't mess up the communication of your device and with your implant. And the other safety feature of that, of course, is if you want to stop using the device, you can simply remove the wearable and the device will stop functioning.
Can you tell us what are the biggest difficulties in brain-computer interface?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, make no mistake, these are very complex technologies. It's complex hardware, it's complex software, and you need a team of experts working on this. We've had to hire some of the best engineers in the world, people with decades of experience within this field, to understand how exactly to design these devices, how to manufacture these devices, and how to make sure that they are stable for decades. This is very, very high performance engineering, that is perhaps comparable to space flight and nothing else on Earth. You're implanting these devices in very, very hostile environment. The body does not want them in there, and it'll start, trying to attack, trying to reject the device. And this is specialized engineering. The second challenge for us then, of course, is regulatory. These are necessarily very highly regulated technologies. They should be. You are controlling someone's biological state. You are leaving something in their very precious body, their very precious brain. And so there is a long line of tests, both in vitro, that means being done on the bench, and in vivo, that means using an appropriate animal model to test the safety of these technologies before you eventually go into human beings. This is a road that has to be very, very carefully navigated and executed efficiently.
Is there a different school of thoughts, like how the brain-computer interface should be done?
Absolutely. There are many ways of carrying out brain-computer interfaces, and you're right, the typical way at the moment and the technologies that we're seeing are using conventional silicon-based electronics, but there are people exploring neuromorphic architectures for carrying out these sort of brain interfaces.
What is neuromorphic?
Neuromorphics are chips that are inspired by the way our brains work. So that may be like massively efficient or massively parallelized compute, a very novel type of architecture that is being used in certain applications. There are other people that are looking at what's called a biohybrid technology. So that is, how do we marry biological intelligence, neurons, with silicon intelligence chips before we implant them? So we do this outside the body, and then we implant them, and we allow the biology, our own biology, to integrate with this exogenous biology, the thing that we're introducing into the body. Now, we're not there yet with that technology. This is very much in sort of the research realm, but there are certainly many people taking a serious look at how this can be done and how this may be the future of brain-computer interfaces.
Thank you for your time today, Ben. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you very much.
I hope you enjoyed this new episode. Your support and your subscribe and your like means a lot to us. It will help us to bring more amazing content like this. Thank you for being here with us today.